and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today, I think I might possibly have the greatest difference in time between me and my guest. My guest is in California. Would you like to introduce yourself, Lydia?
My name's Lydia Wendt, and I'm the founder of California Cloth Foundry.
Now, I came across you recently on a Netflix film. Has that been a bit of a, well, I won't say life changer, but it clearly must have had some impact. We're talking about the Plastic Detox, which was released on Netflix about a month or so ago.
Yes. In fact, it's had a huge impact, obviously, on communications with our brand, on orders, on following, on our, turning up the heat or the volume on kind of education and our reason for existing. Yeah, it's been wonderful, the reaction to this documentary on Netflix.
Now, I
Yeah.
noticed you there and I heard the backstory of how you started out in, well, conventional fashion in New York,
Mm.
working for many well-known brands. Could you talk a bit
Mhm.
about sort of, well, where it started and what you were doing back then? Clearly very different from what you're
Um,
doing now, but let's sort of start at the beginning.
yeah. So, well, first, the toxic detox or the plastic detox film, it had a different name to it. I had met one of the two directors, Louis Sahoyas, um, and I had said, I just love your film, The Cove and Mission Joy. What are you working on now? And he had said that he was working on a film about plastic and human health. And I said, um, interesting. Are you doing anything about textiles? And he said, no. Why? And I said, because everything you're wearing is toxic. We laughed. It's a way to open a conversation, I guess. And so, in a cheeky way,
Yeah.
and then I reverse engineered the colors he was wearing, which were all reactive dyes, petrochemical dyes. The fibers he was wearing, like the puffy jacket with a nylon, and explain what I was wearing, which was natural indigo grown in California on California cleaner cotton and lensing modal, and pretty much compared and contrasted the clothing. So that's how I got into the plastic detox film. And then if you want to reverse my
Let's go right
history,
back.
the reason I tell you the reason I tell you that story is because when I was, well, I began as a student of fashion, and then I dropped out of school to model for a few years, and I was very fortunate to wear some of the most amazing clothing from some of the most amazing designers in the world, including Issey Miyake and Giorgio Armani. And so by wearing those really well-made garments and textiles, I already had in my body, down to like the molecular, level, what it should feel like when it's really well made. Whether it's the fiber or the fit of the garment and the colors, I mean, everything just to a T. Um, and then when I was also modeling, I did a lot of catalog work, and that was really inexpensive clothing and, the beginning of plastic clothing as a fast fashion. So I already had that kind of contrast um, knowledge within me when I went. Essentially, I put myself through fashion school as a fashion designer. So when I started working on design teams with fashion designers and department stores, the knowledge just accumulated as to what those fibers were and what those dyes were. And the only way that when we created these beautiful garments that we would then, mostly when I was working in private label, that we would then present to our customers as a team, they would have a number of different private label companies like ours pitch them the same collection that they had given us design direction on. And so we would pitch our collection, other private label manufacturers would pitch their collections, and they would pick and choose from all of us the styles that they wanted to then produce and purchase from us. And very often, the textiles were too expensive, and the execution of the cutting, sewing, and stitching was a little too detailed. So they would ask us to reduce the price by whatever percentage to hit their, to hit their margins or to hit their price points. And the best way to do that, obviously, you remove some stitching and some pockets and some buttons. But the best way to do that is to reduce the cost of the materials. So that meant plastic. Yeah. So you'd replace those beautiful shell and wood buttons or metal buttons and zippers with plastic zippers, plastic buttons, polyester thread, nylon fabrics, cotton poly blends, cotton, wool, flax, linen, nylon blends. And those blends were kind of insurance that the less expensive fabrics would hold together through a couple launderings and manufacturing. And so that was how the knowledge base began. And that I realized that all of these replacement, less expensive fibers and materials were from plastic. And then dropped out of school or dropped out of the industry for a little bit, had children, started teaching at Academy of Art University in San Francisco, sustainable textiles and apparel and textile design as well. And we were teaching commercial textile design, but introducing a little bit of natural dye. And that with the students who were also the grad students trying to create more sustainable collections, and we would do independent study projects on sustainability, whether it be materials or kind of the circular system of creating a product that was kind of zero waste. All the students were coming up against a problem, which was they couldn't find the right materials to create their sustainable and natural collections. And so when I was teaching there, I didn't work. I actually went to a mushroom dyeing workshop at the Fiber Shed. So on the weekends I would, when I didn't have my kids, I would, kind of explore new ideas and avenues in textiles, in dyeing, in, water saving processes in either the commercial system or kind of the small scale natural home dyeing. And there's a nonprofit called the Fiber Shed up in Northern California that actually was in the film as well. They're about, it's like your watershed, but fibers grown within 150 miles radius of your home. So hyper local and hyper clean and regenerative and ecological. And so they had a mushroom dyeing workshop, and it was the time when it was wet and you could forage the mushrooms. And then we spent a weekend dyeing textiles with mushrooms. And I was already a big fan of mushrooms for their healing benefits. And so I spoke with the founder, Rebecca, and asked her what she was doing. I just helped clean up afterwards. And she said she was working on a project with the North Face, and they were converting a bale of color-grown cotton, which this is a color-grown cotton blended shirt that I'm wearing right now. They were converting a bale of color-grown cotton with the North Face into approximately 100 to 200 hoodies, but they didn't have anybody that understood the commercial supply chain. And I said, I'll do it. And that's how I ended up design directing the Backyard Hoodie project with the North Face for the fiber shed.
So that was a hoodie which was made using very local fibres, and hence the name Backyard.
Yes. So it was called the homegrown hoodie, which is even sweeter, because, it's grown close to home, but homegrown has the connotations of cannabis. And so when we pitched them a larger program, um, on our deck, we put grown and sown in your own
Yeah.
backyard. And so they're like, aha moment. Let's not do homegrown, let's do backyard. So that was the backyard project. And that one bale of color grown cotton from Sally Fox ended up being I integrated a nonprofit called the Sustainable Cotton Project, which I had been working with and bringing students from the Academy of Art where I was teaching. I'd bring them down for their cotton tour, the cotton field tour. And so I presented to the North Face that we bring two nonprofits together, which obviously was the Fiber Shed, which was the idea,
Yeah.
the origin nonprofit, and then Sustainable Cotton Project. And they were growing cleaner cotton, which was the regenerative cotton of the time in 2013, cleaner cotton in the Central Valley of California. So that is all within 150 miles radius. So that's their own backyard.
And of course,
Yes.
Sally Fox is something of a legend in the cotton industry,
She's
farming.
amazing.
Could you
Yes.
tell us a bit
Yes.
more about Sally?
I don't know if she's on the board now, but she was on the board of Fiber Shed at that time. And that one bale. It was one bale of Sally Fox color grown cotton. And then when we grew it from 200 hoodies to 7,000 hoodies for the first backyard project, um, Sally, they did a beautiful video, kind of a whole farm story about Sally, and then a farm story about Sustainable Cotton Project. And they did kind of a whole American revival or the American story of cotton. So Sally is a big part of the American story of cotton in breeding of color grown cotton, which she brought up from. I don't want to tell her story and be misquoted, but I think she grew up in the cotton industry as a scientist and a breeder, and introduced the color grown cotton and spent the majority of her career breeding the best color grown cotton and converting it into fibers and yarns for a number of different brands at the time. I guess that was in the 90s when it was too early to really scale, but she scaled with Levi's. And I'm forgetting there were Esprit. She did many, many collaborations. So this was, you know, another collaboration for
I
her.
keep seeing her name pop up in the weirdest places. And if anyone's wondering what colour grown means, that means it's been bred not to be as white as possible, but in various natural colours, isn't it? So you can get
Yes.
brown cotton, which is naturally grown.
Yes, correct. And cotton cotton grew in colors before the color was bred out of it. So in breeding, they created a lighter and lighter cotton boll fiber so that they could control the color that then they would add onto it. So, if you're reverse engineering a garment, you want to be able to control all of the materials from the fiber all the way through to the dyeing process and the finishing process. And if you begin with a color that is grown that way, and every season the color is a little different, you don't have as much consistency or control over the materials. And that is one of the reasons why cotton was bred, all the color was bred out of cotton to be
I
white.
guess white
Yeah.
was maybe a more desirable colour for industrial purposes because people wanted white t-shirts and white sheets and whatever. Yeah.
Linens and
Okay. Yeah.
right. And it takes color better, right? If you put color on top of color grown, you've got it's beautiful and we do it all the time, but you have less you have different factors to deal with, right? So begin with a white canvas,
Hmm.
let's say, blank,
So you're
but
saying they
white.
made, was it 7,000 backyard hoodies? That must have been a massive operation.
Yes, and in fact, that's why I founded California Cloth Foundry, because the North Face does not manage materials. They only design direct and manage the material, the finished garment. So they don't take on any liability for any of the materials or the conversion of that materials. The only thing that they can do is test it and work as the advisory design director, design
Right.
direction. So the nonprofit Fiber Shed also could not take on the liability of the materials, nor could Sustainable Cotton Project. So that cotton needed to be purchased a minimum of 8 to 12 months before the hoodie could actually be produced and land in the North Face distribution center for the North Face to be able to pay for that hoodie. So somebody had to manage the liability. And so I founded California Cloth Foundry to manage the liability for that cotton before it got sold into the open market.
Right.
And what then I did, bringing it full circle back to teaching, because I stopped teaching in 2013-14 when I was managing the Backyard Hoodie Project, because it did become so large. I already had students that wanted textiles that they had no access to. And so what I did was I combined the Backyard Hoodie Project with orders from students and small brands, and created the company to be able to supply not only the fiber and the yarn and the fabric for the backyard hoodie for the North Face and Fiber Shed, but also to supply small designers and students with textiles that were completely pure. And so that would be their blank canvas to be able to create their naturally dyed textiles and apparel from.
I like the idea. That is very good because finding good fabrics is just so difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Now, at some point also during these years, you did sort of pivot away from the regular fashion industry and into the more sustainable side of things. This was back when sustainable as an expression or actually held some meaning, not like today.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And that was even when I was in New York, before I was married and moved to San Francisco, sustainability was a buzzword, as you say, and it was all, it was brand new. We had heard about the climate crisis, and we were all kind of slightly traumatized by it, and we were trying to figure out what this climate, you know, change was all about. And the answer to that in our industry was organic cotton and recycled plastic bottles into clothing. So that's where the beginning of sustainability, for me anyway, that was my exposure to sustainability in the industry. And when I was in New York, we did try to swap out some of the conventional fibers for the organic cotton and the plastic bottled polyester yarns. And that was marginal progress there. But then when I kind of left the industry and then started teaching, that's when, that was 10 years later, approximately, maybe a little less than that. But moving to San Francisco and starting to teach, that's when the buzzword of sustainability became really bold. And that's when all the students were being creative on what that actually meant in the fashion industry. So yeah, it was a slow transition. But one other thing, when I was raising my kids, even before I started teaching, I was part of the activist group of textile geeks in San Francisco protesting flame retardants on children's clothing and beddings and furniture textiles. And that was a big deal back then. I think it was around 2000. It was around the time I was diagnosed with cancer. So 2004, 5, 6, 7. And at that point, I was only focused on fibers and flame retardant and formaldehyde.
Okay.
And then when I was diagnosed with cancer and I was really trying to figure out, how to make an even cleaner and healthier world for my children, and I did not. I bought all of the banned beddings and clothing from other states that did not have the regulated flame retardant on them for my children and for my home. But the you know the diagnosis of cancer was not really an aha moment. It was just the tipping point to explore deeper what these materials were not only being made from, but what they were being coated
Yeah.
with. And that's how the natural dyes and the from sustainability of organic cottons and organic fibers and recycled fibers to what are they being coated with and what are they being colored with. And so that was a long, slow process of trial and error and
I
education.
just got chills down my back, and because this is where it gets really dark, really. Once you start looking
Yeah.
into this, and it just struck me this afternoon that there's all this talk about, yeah, you've got to do your own research, man. You've got to look into things. You've got to Google stuff, research, and so much of what we do now and have to relate to, we're expected to do our own research because we can't trust anyone. And I know for many
No.
people, the clothing industry and clothes, it's just so trivial, it's just clothes. They're benign. There's no problem there. And then you start looking into it and you start gaining knowledge, and it's just, oh God, can't you trust anything?
No, it's mind-boggling. It is true. And trust is a really important word here with what's happening now, I think, which is the realization that you can't trust the label that says it's sustainable because it's from organic cotton, right? Or it's from this jacket was made from 30 water bottles, right? That all sounds really good, but that now is kind of greenwashing because they're not sharing with you the chemistry in the organic cotton t-shirt to make it black and to make it um, non-wrinkle, wrinkle proof formaldehyde, right? Or and the other is the plastic bottles sounds really great, or you're cleaning up the beaches and turning that plastic into polar fleece, but so that brand wants you to trust them because they're doing something good. But unfortunately, if you don't do your research, you don't realize that the chemistry is really toxic and the fiber is pervasive. It's breaking into tiny little particles and getting into our bodies and all of our
I
food.
often wonder, I mean, what makes cotton organic, and can we actually trust that it is in some way better? Because I remember when organic first became a thing, suddenly
Mm,
all these brands had tons and tons of organic cotton. It's like, hang on, where did all that come from?
true. That's a hard one too. There you go with trust again. This is so difficult because I don't want to be I don't want to, it's my industry, right? So I don't want to demonize it 100%.
Just a bit.
So let's go in just a bit. Here, we'll do 25%. So 25%, I think it's 25% right now. It keeps changing a little bit, but if you buy a 100% organic cotton, GOTS certified organic cotton t-shirt, 25% of that organic cotton t-shirt is allowed to be from other cotton, which
Okay.
could be conventional. And then, obviously, as I mentioned before, it can be coated with all of these other petrochemicals and formaldehyde to make it quite toxic. And it can be up to 30% coating on top of that pristine, 75 or 70% or even 90% fiber. You've still got a percentage all the way around that fiber that's coated with the toxic petrochemicals. So when it's a GOTS certified organic cotton t-shirt, that does not mean the chemicals to make it are GOTS certified, healthy, clean, or organic. It means that 75% of the fiber, not of the weight of that garment, because the weight of that garment is added weight because of the chemicals.
Right.
So 75% of the core fiber of that garment should be, if it says it's GOTS certified, that means it is from an organic cotton farmer. And they do trace that organic cotton in the United States with the USDA very, very closely. All of the gins that pull the cotton fiber off of the cotton seed, they pull a plug out of each bale, and that plug gets wrapped with a number and sent to the USDA for their records. So they do trace all of the cotton that is grown in America that is sold into the conventional cotton system. Every bale is tagged. So in America, if it says organic cotton, it is organic cotton, but it could be 25% other cotton in that t-shirt. Globally, there was, as you said, once organic cotton became so popular, every brand had organic cotton in their collection. Well, globally, I don't know the number, but it's like 20% or 25% of all the cotton grown in the world is organic. It might be even less than that now. How did all these brands get a hold of all this organic cotton and convert all of their collection into organic? So there's a possibility that much of that cotton that's labeled organic is conventional or blended with organic. So that is a problem. And how do you trace all of that cotton? There's many different solutions now that they didn't have before as far as tracking goes electronically. And as the USDA does in America, I'm sure that they do that in other countries. And so there's these certifications like GOTS and OEcotex that have fiber certification tracking systems to make it easier for brands to be able to claim and be sure that there is at least 75% when they say 100% organic cotton.
So I guess that's the case. If brands want to document it, they can. But then you've got all the brands who don't care too much about that, who just flood the market with
Put it
with
on
other
there.
things. Well, I mean, what's to say? Who's you write organic cotton on the label? I mean, who's going to catch you out? No, I guess
It's a lot of work to do that, right? Who is going to catch you? And if they do catch you, it's so much time and energy to prosecute,
by
right?
the time that's done, that collection is sold out. So, oh, sorry, won't do it again. Until next time.
Right. Yeah. So that's all about trust, and that's why I say that if you are concerned about what's on your organic cotton t-shirt or what's in your athletic wear or any of your clothing, you as a consumer need to go to the brands and look at how they're certifying and who they are and whether you can trust them or not. That's your own gut feeling. It's really nobody's going to. There's a lot of apps out there now that are helping, and nonprofits that are vetting brands, but they usually vet brands with the information that the brands give them. They do not have the financial ability to test them.
In my
Yeah.
experience, brands aren't really too keen on saying too much, or they just don't know because they've bought the fabrics from a distributor and
Yes.
not quite sure where it was made, but you just have to trust the labels. And I don't know.
Right. Right.
I
And
always think
so
it's so
here's,
weird how people say, "Oh, but you must learn to read the labels on the clothing, so you can know what's in them, the content." But then I've also been hearing that, well, who's to say that those are accurate and truthful? So it's like,
yeah.
really,
Well, it's like our food as well,
it's a good
right?
comparison.
You know, I mean, the more it's processed, the more mystery ingredients. And so I'm doing laundry, and there's a pair of shorts that has a men's workout shorts that are 100% cotton French terry, organic cotton from China, made in China. And it's got a liner in it, a little stretch wool liner in it. And it's supposed to be 100% wool and 100% cotton on the outside. And I did not purchase this, but I was doing this for my partner. And I turned it inside out, and I was bummed that there was actually a hole already in the stretch liner of these workout shorts. And when I looked in the hole, because I'm like, well, maybe I can just stitch that
Yeah,
closed, I pulled out of this organic 100% wool liner, I pulled out a spandex, or not spandex, yeah, a elastane yarn. I pulled it right out of the hole of the fabric. It was knit into this elastane yarn, or
yeah.
spandex was actually knit into this 100% organic wool shorts liner. So that means that the brand that paid all this money to the manufacturer to source 100% organic cotton and 100% organic wool, um, the manufacturer purchased something that would stretch and ensure that the stretch worked perfectly because it has elastane in it. And nobody knew or put that on the label.
I mean,
So
probably
unfortunately,
increased functionality, but it
yes,
wasn't what was ordered. So, hmm,
yes. So unfortunately, reading the labels is a good step in the right direction, but trusting the brand is much more important, and that brand is going to answer your questions and be knowledgeable about the materials that they're making claims on.
hmm,
Yeah, is the most important, I
yeah.
think.
I have been in the past year or so been asking quite a few questions of certain of the brands I like, and it has given me something of a reputation as being that guy again.
Right?
So yeah, it's not something they necessarily do appreciate, but I like to think that being a bit persistent in this way will motivate them to be more accurate, and because if they can just put the labels right to start with, then they won't have that guy from Norway asking all these questions again. But
That's right. And I think, as you said before, there's a lack of trust. And I think when you have a lack of trust, and you may have a lot more questions, like that guy from Norway asking all those questions. There's also a generation coming up right now. I have two kids that are in their early 20s, and they are asking questions. Of course, they are my kids, so they know the questions to ask. But their community is doing this, not just my children. All children are asking these questions. All children are entering now this new environment of information overload. And in that information overload, there's a lot of distrust. And so they are going to tiny brands because they can see the face, like mine, of the brand, and they can actually hear the origin story, and it gives them some hope,
Yeah.
right? And then when you go to the large manufacturers, because of convenience, they don't trust them. They're just hoping that what's on the label is true, right? And I also think that that is going to push the industry, as you said before. I think that's what you were inferring, that once there's a number, a mass movement towards these questions and this distrust, to regain the customer's trust, whether you're a multi-million or billion-dollar brand or a small brand like myself, they're all going to have to answer the questions. So they're going to have to rework how they vet their suppliers, and it's going to go down the supply chain to carrying certificates all the way through. Like, I carry all the certificates from my mills, and I also purchase most of the fibers that go into my mills, and then that fiber goes into the yarns, and then I purchase, or we purchase, California Cloth Foundry purchases most of the natural chemistry for our dye houses so that they can finish with our colors and our chemistry so that they don't have to take on the liability. And if these small brands like myself are doing that, that is going to move the needle for the larger brands to be able to start to do that as well.
That's an important point you're making here between the small brands with a face who care and then the large faceless mega corporations who can't really do anything to document or be transparent because it's too much work and so forth. But the smaller brands which are they're busy documenting everything and being so transparent and doing everything properly, but there's a huge chasm between these two variants.
Yes. Yeah. You know, the chasm is, I think that's happened as well. I bring it back to food, right? You know, the local farmer versus the mass-produced food that comes from who knows where around the world for your large chain department or grocery store. It's the same thing. So this is a cultural shift.
The food comparison,
Hopefully it.
is very good because I mean you're like natural food, which you recognise as food, but then you have the food products, the sort of things made in labs, like breakfast cereals with lurid colours and all sorts of weird things, which someone 100 years ago would never have thought to recognise as food, really.
Yeah.
So, and that is also interesting because of the trust issues, because we also do trust the people who make our food to be giving us actual food. But then that also turns out not really to always be the case because a lot of these food products are inherently very unhealthy.
Yeah. And as far as the economy goes, the processed food is traditionally less expensive than the farmer's market, or the produce that is, you know, grown locally and sold locally. And so that is that's a financial burden on the health of our communities, right? And so my recommendation there is to eat less, wear less, buy less, and make your own food from the raw materials, and purchase and repair your clothing that you're going to wear and care for, and live a little bit more slowly and more simply and closer to earth and nature, which grow a few things if you possibly can. But if you can't afford to, just eat the most simple foods. Don't buy that bag of chips and that, you know, processed meal that's in the freezer that you pop into the microwave or the oven.
I mean, it's really pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, when you're saying that, I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? So why is it we're sort of tempted not to do that? Is it massive marketing forces, or I mean, why do we feel we need to buy so much and eat so much rubbish, and or is that way out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with clothing, right? It's convenience and it's marketing. You do not want to appear like you're too, unfortunately, but I think this is shifting again, once again, culturally. You don't want to appear too crafty or too modest. You want to appear like you have new things all the time and you can keep up with everyone else because that's what we're being fed culturally. Same with food, same, all of our lifestyle products, our electronics, our cars, our, especially clothing, right? It has to look new and you can't wear it all the time and you can't repair it. But there is also there is a cultural shift to looking crafty and living more grounded and closer to the earth and nature and creating foods that look like they were actually grown in your own backyard, right? Or wearing clothing that looks like it could have been grown in your own backyard. So there is that cultural shift, but that's just not mass right now. I think that it is a new and wonderful paradigm shift happening. It could just be because I, live in a bubble in California, but I see it, in the UK. Europe is way ahead of the curve, I would say.
Well, I mean, we have had the sort of slow fashion movement in
Mm.
Europe, which is, I mean, it's not really the opposite of the fast fashion, but I mean, the main mantra is kind of buy once, buy better. So slowing
Yes.
it down, and a lot of it is, and I think this is where it stops up for most people, is it does involve buying much more expensive things. So you are competing with few expensive items versus being able to order a haul, a huge box of cheap stuff, which I think is
Right.
where a lot of people find it difficult to make a switch into the slower way of things.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's culturally imposed upon us through marketing and through just our lifestyle films, everything. It's just the lifestyle expectations, even if you can't afford it, to buy the cheapest that looks like the expensive, right? That is completely, plastic, but looks good for one or two wears. But the other side of that is if you can't buy new, natural, buy used, right? I mean, that is a very popular, there's even the haul, the thrift shop haul. You can see that on TikTok. You can see that all
Right.
over, social media right now. And I am not I'm not promoting any type of haul, but if you're looking for a wardrobe that you can't afford new, go to the thrift stores, go to the consignment shops, buy used, but buy lighter colors that are natural fibers, and you'll be safer than plastic, nylon, elastane, polyester fibers, and really dark dyes that are coated with shiny stuff, right? Or plastisol prints. Anything light printed on top of dark fabric, you're probably assured that that's got some plastic, and potentially the plasticizers in there, those chemicals. So when you're even going for the thrift store clothing, just be thoughtful about what you're going to purchase that's going to be the healthiest for you, and then play around with modifying it on the sewing machine, right? Or buy some natural dyes, over dye it, tie dye it. That's getting,
Very
popular
California.
again. Yes, yeah, do, embroider it, slow down a little bit and buy something used and make it your own.
Now, I want to talk to you a bit about clothes waste and the thrifting bit, but I'll put a pin in that for a moment because I'd like to hear more about. I mean, you're talking about flame retardant, children's clothing, and so forth, and we're talking about petrochemical dyes. I mean, I hear about clothes coming from China, from Timu and Shein, which are laden with heavy metals. I mean, how can our clothes contain so many toxic substances?
Uh, in my opinion, and also from my professional experience, it is because these toxic substances were integrated into colors to ensure that either you get that color, whether it's a kind of a neon green or a shiny black. So the colors, when you add some of those heavy metals and those, and the lead and the azo dyes, it is a insurance policy for the dye houses that they can match the color, that color's not going to fade, and that color is consistent, lot to lot. So the chemistry was just created for consistency, and so they wouldn't get charged back for it fading or, you know, having any unevenness um, or not matching the Pantone chip that the design house sent them.
Mm.
So that's one thing in the color. And then did you mention the formaldehyde that is a treatment for making it the cotton shiny, for making the materials, usually cotton, wrinkle free. So if you bought a men's shirt or a woman's shirt or clothing that is wrinkle free, 9 times out of 10, that is doused in formaldehyde
Ah,
because that reduces the wrinkles. It also is it also is a preservative.
yeah.
Formaldehyde is a preservative, obviously. And so if that is being shipped across the waterways and you're going across the ocean, there's lots of salt sea air, right? And there's moisture and potentially other bacteria that could get into these containers with all of this clothing from China or other overseas manufacturers. And so you want to preserve that and protect it from any damages. So it's insurance. All of these chemicals were created to ensure that the dye house, that the fabric mill, that the clothing manufacturers that get the orders, and these margins are so small for them, they add the toxic chemistry to make sure that they don't get charged back, that product ends up being sold through these fast fashion brands, um, looking plastic, looking exactly like the photo. It doesn't matter the ingredients.
Now, in the Plastic Detox film, there was a concept launched, green chemistry, and it was like, is
John
this
Warner.
really not how how everyone works? It was stunning.
Yes, that is what I just explained. Over the course of 50 years, 60, 80 years of chemistry in using petrochemicals and creating fast fashion, they're not concerned about the health and wellness of the chemicals. They're concerned about the performance only. So John Warner, brilliant green chemist, he coined the phrase with his partner, green chemistry. And as he said, added a layer on top of performance chemistry that said, if we're creating this performance aspect from this chemistry, what is it doing to our health, right? What is the byproduct? What is the impact? Is it negative? Well, then we can't do it. let's be uncomfortable here. We cannot create something that's going to perform if it creates unhealthy or toxicity, you know. That's just not acceptable. And as he also said, plastic isn't the problem. And so we have to be very careful when we talk about plastic. I preface it with petrochemical derived plastic because there are many bioplastics out there. And in fact, the cellophane bags that we use to package up our clothing, cellophane is from cellulose. That is from plants. The original plastic was from plants. So it's not the word, unfortunately, plastic now is, synonymous with petrochemicals and toxicity and microplastic, which is in our bodies, right? That doesn't biodegrade. So that's a marketing problem. Nobody's going to create a bioplastic anymore. They've got to create a bio something else. They've got to name it something else. That's all. That's a marketing issue. But green chemistry, if that had been applied onto plastic at its inception and applied to dyes at their inception, after natural dyes were phased out, then we wouldn't have this problem.
No.
Or it'd be less.
I find it very worrying how garments made for athletic pursuits all have to be plastics and often treated with various chemicals to reduce the sweaty smell and so forth. And you're wearing these whilst doing an activity that makes you sweat, so your pores are lovely and open, and all this plastics and chemicals all nicely.
Yeah, and elastane is incorporated in it so that there is no distance between your skin, which is heating up and also heating up the fibers and the dyes of that fabric. And once you heat up plasticized fibers, especially soft plasticized fibers, you're softening it even more. You're releasing the chemistry. That chemistry is mixing with your sweat. You're absorbing it. You're running, you're sloughing or shedding the fibers. You're inhaling it. It's all a bad. And then you throw it into the washing machine and that enters your waterways. But the worst part is, your skin is absorbing what you put on it. And that's what I said in the film. Your skin's your largest organ, and it absorbs what you put on it, including the chemistry from textiles that you're wearing.
And then you get to find out that, but now we've got some green chemists who are looking at it 40 years after they should have been looking at it or something.
Yeah, I know. It's hindsight's 2020, right? So we need to just look forward now. We are working on a natural stretch, and we're working with natural stretch innovators with yarns. Of course, we're only natural dyes, so our colors are not the colors of the petrochemical colors that are put onto petrochemical yarns. And there are natural finishes from the beginning of time, botanicals have been antimicrobial, astringent, antibacterial. Those are just givens with botanicals, with medicinal botanicals that are very often natural dyes as well. So there are coatings now being innovated upon for athletic and just regular textiles from many different, corners of this earth, from many different thought leaders and think tanks. And so that is the hope of the future of textiles, in especially athletic, in intimate, anything next to your skin. But we're doing it as well. We're working on, as I said, an athletic collection that will replace that athletic collection that is performance oriented, so therefore plastic. And it doesn't have to be, right? It can all be green chemistry.
I'm guessing the stretchy bit, the elastane replacement, that must be the tricky one.
That is the hardest. Yes. And waterproof is the other one. But waterproof, we're not doing that. There's so many innovators out there doing that. But we'll do the elastic in a second. War has devastated humans for whatever our entire history of mankind. But war has also funded innovation. And I think it was it I think it was World War II, but it could have been World War I. There was, in Europe specifically, there was huge funding for the innovation of performance in natural fibers, yarns, weaving, knitting, um, for for the
Yeah.
troops, right? So there was waterproof cotton that was woven so tight and spun so fine and then coated with some wax. That was waterproof. That is your performance fabric.
Yeah,
It costs
that
too much.
wasn't. I mean, I do like the very tightly woven cotton, but not all of it was totally honest because you have Ventile, which was said to swell and become even more waterproof as it became a bit wet. But that was actually coated
Mm.
with the PFAS, which
Mm,
is of
yeah.
course now being
Hmm.
outlawed and causing massive problems in the outdoors industry because that was kind of their go-to way of proofing
Yes.
stuff. So now they're going
Right.
back to sort of waxes and weird combinations there. But I mean, often it's a case.
But we need those weird
But often
combinations,
it's a
right?
case of, I mean, how
So
good does this stuff have to be? Does a
I
coat
agree.
have to be 100% water repellent? Maybe not.
No,
So,
no. That is the issue. Back to the military. Yes, because it was heavily
mm,
funded. Yes, it had to perform
mm,
100%. In in my life, even professional athletes, they need frictionless clothing because they're superhuman,
mm,
you know, uh, Olympic athletes, right? They're like high performance. It's their careers, it's
yeah,
their life. So just like the military, what they're looking for is the best performance in these fibers. But in actuality, there is no need for that raincoat to be um, super, super light, super quick drying, and 100%
yeah.
waterproof. You can manage life, even climbing Mount Everest, without the toxic petrochemicals because it was done before those toxic petrochemicals were introduced. Marathons were run with cotton t-shirts and cotton track
Yeah.
shorts and cotton underwear, maybe some wool. So all of this performance is being funded for competition and the wow factor, and we don't need it. You're correct.
It all comes down to making money, doesn't it? Because if you're bringing out new and improved versions of all this athletic gear all the time, people will just keep buying it. All these plastic shoes and plastic shirts and shorts and bits and pieces.
Yes. And there's this idea that everybody knows more than you do, the consumer. So when we tell you something, you need to go and buy this. There's a brand that used an old term called space dye.
Space dye.
Space dyeing yarn is actually dyeing yarn in different
Okay.
colors. So it's an old phrase. It was it was reused this last year on performance textiles to indicate some special performance that gave it some UV protection and quick drying protection. And it was a marketing term that was used to sell more garments in the athletic wear industry because dry fit, which is Nike's terminology, and let's say, oh, I don't know, there's a lot of different terms from other brands, and those are all conceived of and then patented and trademarked. And I'm sure this space dye performance is also being trademarked and marketed as a performance aspect that you need. You don't buy the same garment in the same color if it's not space dyed, because you're not going to get these added performance qualities. And that's marketing. You don't need it.
I think the last thing anyone thinks of when they see me going for a run is performance. So I don't actually.
Me as well.
No, it's good Lord, no.
I'm part of a was part of a running group in San Francisco. I don't get up there very much any longer, but when I do, I run with them, and um, I've um, I've been fortunate to kit them out in some of my apparel, and because it's cold up there, most of us wear the the sweat
Right.
pant, the pant that's on our website. But anyway, it's pretty much unisex, so the men and women wear it, and sometimes two-thirds of us are wearing it. It's only a small 5 to 6 running group, right? And so we all get together at 6 o'clock in the morning on the corner, and one of the runners, he's like, I'm wearing my Live Forever pants again. And it's kind of sweet. They're sweatpants that you run in, and the concept is, if you wear something healthy like this, you're going to live forever, right? So there you go. That's a trademark right there. Instead of all the performance, this is, a lifestyle
Plus, you're on the
choice.
factory athletic team. I mean, how cool is that?
Exactly.
Now, something I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned natural indigo. Now, this is something of a bugbear for me, because when I hear natural indigo, I think, well, that must be derived from indigo plants. But then when I follow it up, typically with denim makers who use the term natural indigo, is this dye from indigo plants? And they'll, well, and then they'll say, no, it's synthetically equivalent.
That kills me. Yes, I know. I've heard that as well.
And
Yeah.
for me, that is when my brain starts frying, because for me, that is not natural indigo then. But
Yeah. Can you see that right there? No, let's see. It's up
yes, is
there.
that
Right.
indigo
Right.
plant?
Yes, that's dried
Mm-hmm.
indigo. That is it's just
Yeah.
leaves. And natural indigo, obviously, are from the leaves of the
Yeah.
indigo plant. It's the same woad. So what is the natural indigo that's not from the indigo botanical? I have no idea. It's synthetic materials that have been synthesized to resemble the beauty of natural indigo. That's all I can say. I have no idea. But I would assume that is petrochemically derived ingredients that they have created to replicate the coating that natural indigo gives as a pigment. Because it is a pigment. It is not a stain. It is a pigment that dyes and actually sits on top of your fiber. So that's why they're probably saying that it's a non-botanical synthetic that sits on top of your fiber, just like natural indigo does, like a pigment.
I can tell why they do it, because especially in expensive salvage denim, all these things matter, because people like me get really geeky about it, and then, oh, natural indigo, oh yes, that sounds excellent. But then they get really snarky when I start asking questions about exactly how the process is. But there we go.
Right. It is a very special with denim, right? It's a very special process. You don't weave up a blank canvas pair of pants and then dye it in a vat of natural or synthetic indigo. You rope dye the yarns so that they have a core of white still. And then as it abrades off, you get that gorgeous denim look, right? as the pigment starts to rub off. Yeah.
So yeah, just one of these things. One of these things. Um,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
I do wonder. I mean, why doesn't everyone just make things right? I mean, this is a paints me as a total innocent, naive fool. But why can't everyone just make proper products in the right way, and then we can avoid all this mess?
It's once again going back to that original question that you had about all the toxic chemistry. Um, that chemistry has been heavily funded by the chemical industry to replace what is the right way to do it. And the right way to do it with non-toxic and natural materials that are not petrochemical, um, that was perfected, a couple hundred years ago, right? So we're a couple hundred years behind,
Yeah.
or at least 100 years behind. And we don't have that heavy funding that the petrochemical industry had to create, instead of silk stockings, nylon stockings. Brilliant, right? All that you find a market, you replace it with petrochemicals that are easily controlled, less expensive because you're not growing it, you're extracting it out of the
No.
ground, and you bring it through a process that ensures insurance, right? That it will be consistent every season because there is no season for oil and gas. It's all extracted the same way. It all comes through and it's all produced the same way. But natural materials are seasonal and you have to shift a little bit with every season. Not a lot, but we haven't spent a lot of there hasn't been a lot of investment in the commercialization. I don't like that word, but it's just a word that is being used in my industry a lot. There hasn't been enough innovation, um, investment in the commercialization of non-toxic natural materials that you grow. So it's going to take that equivalent. And the military is not going to invest in that because the military is about performance, just like the Olympics are about performance. We need to find other investment avenues that are going to support this type of innovation because it's the right way to do it and it's going to be the healthiest way to do it. And I would say, but I haven't really explored this, that it should be the health insurance companies because everybody's getting sick from all this toxic material. So if they invest down the supply chain in healthy materials, they're not going to have all these sick patients to fund their health care
Yeah.
around. So, let's figure out how to get into the healthcare industry side of insurance and say, this is the future. You invest in it now, you're going to have better margins in 10 to 30 years.
I did think that the Plastic Detox film had a very, very, what's the word, a killer selling point in that, are you planning to have children? I mean, would you
Mm.
trade being infertile for wearing all these plastic clothes and so forth? I mean, it's your choice. Uh, that is a very compelling argument.
Yes. I think that's the most brilliant, storyline to bring it home to, well, we're going to become we're going to just go extinct, right? Because of our fertility dropping 1% a year. But then bringing it to you personally, you want to have a kid? How are you going to do that if you're surrounded by
Yeah.
plastic? So that was really
I keep
smart. Yeah.
recommending people
And
watch it, and they say, "Oh, you're going on about that again. We have to throw away our kitchen utensils and that." And because I think the program isn't sort of presented as well as it could be.
are you saying it's not presented as well as it could be because of the name or because of
Maybe the name and the
the
description slightly. It
Ah,
sounds a bit
yeah.
like a sort of hippie, crusty, oh, we're going to throw away our plastic things and live a happy life. But if you, I mean, if you manage to frame it more like, look, your plastic is means you're not going to be having any kids, then that's a lot stronger message.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The survival of our species,
Yeah,
right?
get David
That's,
Attenborough in to do a voiceover.
yeah, no, that's the next one, right? No, I do agree with you. The fertility issue is a big deal, and that is also why I think that we're going to not only have a following from the 20 somethings and the what is Z
Yeah.
generation, Gen Z, is it? Um, not just because small brands are doing it right and telling the story and actually showing where the materials are coming from and explaining why it's expensive and it is what it is, but also because it's fear. They want children. This that Gen Z wants children. They're dreaming about it right now, and they're being told by the Plastic Detox documentary that they may not be able to have children if they surround themselves with these plastic materials. So yeah, I agree with you. It's just it's I think it's an easier topic to to promote as a detox than a fertility
Yeah.
film.
Well, I think a lot of people who watch it do come away with more ideas and have learnt a lot more. Plus, I mean, it was a very charming program with the people who actually did manage to get pregnant and so forth. I mean, I was pretty touched by
Yeah,
it.
so nice. Yeah. Yeah, so I also it didn't make it into the film. And many reasons why, probably because you don't want it to be too much about
Yeah.
my company, California Cloth Foundry, but we did gift every single couple a set of towels, men's briefs, women's cami, bralette, joggers for the men, t-shirt for the men, from my company as well as Industry of All Nations. So a little plug on them as well, which is a great natural fashion company as well. We gifted them a whole wardrobe, right? Including towels. And they gifted them as well, I think, as you saw in that film, many home products so that it was a starter kit. It was a starter kit for their entire home. And I think that is another charming part of it that they didn't highlight the apparel because it came in a little too late in the storyline, but that the couples were all so delighted to see what the options were in real time, right? They could hold it and they could wear it and they could use the utensils and the soaps and the home products. And I think that's also why they use the term plastic detox, because of that concept and less about the fertility.
You did touch on
Yeah.
something just now, fashion. I think fashion is a big part of the problem we are having now with our clothes.
Yeah.
And I mean, a company like yours, I mean, I don't think you're really sort of in the fashion, you're not trying to keep up with current trends. You're doing your
No.
own thing,
Mm.
making proper things. And if we could just slow down a lot of what is fashion, because fashion also drives the incredible volume we're talking all the time. And I think we can't be able to supply that volume through natural fibres. Not that there's any sort of silver bullet that will magically fix everything here, but volume is a huge part of it, and fashion drives the volume, and the volume requires the plastic fabrics and yada yada.
Mm.
Not sure where I was going with that, other than making a point, but
Well, I can agree with you 100%. Well, the first thing, no, we don't follow trends, though we are constantly paying attention to them. And our goal is to convert your closet to healthy, right? So these are collectible pieces. One by one, you can collect them, and season by season, they will all add together to make a timeless wardrobe, right? So we're not trendy. We're on trend because natural is the trend, right? Um, so, as far as shifting trends and fast fashion goes, that is a marketing ploy, and I don't think I mean, it's smart, but it's caused a huge burden on our environment, and on our labor system as well. It's unsustainable, right? And so one fix is that prices actually rise, right? So the true cost, there's a film called True
Yeah.
Cost, and you may have seen it. And the true cost of clothing is not clothing is not priced properly, right? It should be an investment. It should be a wardrobe build. It should not be a throwaway. A whatever $9 T-shirt for a weekend birthday party that everybody wears. Alan's 90th birthday, and then they chuck it, right? That's just horrible, right? So that's one concept. But just the fast fashion is the same thing, where you only wear something for an event. You buy it for the event, so you buy it cheap, and you wear it once and you throw it away. That we have to completely realign costing. Everything has to be more expensive so that people think about what they're buying and they buy less. Then culturally, you have to shift it to re-wearing your clothing is really cool, and tell the story why. And repairing your clothing is really cool. And buying thrift and vintage and consignment, and then maybe hand stitching or making it your own or even over dyeing it, make that the cool factor. Then when you're talking about a system that is toxic and replacing all the petrochemical clothing with natural, that naturally raises the price. And if you're raising the price, it's going to slow the system down a little bit. You're going to make a little less. Don't get me wrong, I want to scale. We scale, and we're scaling right now for to refill our inventory to supply all the orders that we're getting from this great Netflix film. But that scale is a more reasonable scale. And all of the natural materials around the world, whether, if we can't get organic cotton, we get hemp or linen, flax, we get, lensing, which is the best, modal in the world, or tencel in the world, because it's super clean. It's produced super clean from forest stewardship certified birch forests that are actually sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, and you cut it down, you turn it into clothing, and they grow more trees and sequester more carbon. Same with cotton. So I don't think that the argument about, well, all the natural resources will run out if we ban plastic clothing, so we can't do that because we'll break the system. I don't think that that's a valid argument. There's enough natural resources around the world to grow your clothing and to grow your dyes and to grow your finishes, and not to break the system. And it will just slow down ever so slightly. But the price difference will compensate for the amount of plastic clothing you have to sell at that same profit.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Just to clarify, I think we have enough natural resources to satisfy the clothes we need, but maybe not the clothes we want, which is the sort of huge disparity. I think there was a major point lost. Was it last year? There was this trend about old money style, where you were supposed to dress like the East Coast Coast elite, sort of old money. But it sort of turned into more Russian oligarch new money thing, but just buying hideously expensive fashion products. Whilst really the ultimate
Yeah.
old money, I think, is pretty much King Charles, who has
Mm,
the
hmm.
ability he can buy whatever he wants, but he wears some awfully old, used up, repaired stuff, and he's like the king of England.
I love that. Yes. It was quiet luxury. Yeah, that was the phrase
But
I think
I think
that
that was also, I think they were running a bit in parallel. But old money was one of them. But quiet
oh yeah.
luxury,
The old
that was
money and
when
the
you
quiet
had to buy
luxury,
all this
right.
fashion,
Yeah.
high fashion stuff without labels on, because
Without
if you
labels,
know,
yes,
you
yes, yes.
know.
And then it shifted. Yes, then it shifted to flashy again. Yeah. And unfortunately, yes, the to me, the New England, I mean, I can't really talk about European, although I built the company to I aspire to be like the Laura Piana, making the textiles and also then making the clothing, and it all being slowly, quietly created from the best materials ever,
Yeah,
right? So that's why King Charles purchases that, it was gorgeous cashmere sweater or whatever jacket, or suit from, maybe it was made for him, but then it's repaired and he wears it until it completely falls apart because number one, it was made from amazing materials to start with, and he becomes attached to it. Number two, to replace it, you'd have to go through the whole process again. And why replace something that's working, right? For him, he doesn't have to keep up with the Joneses. He doesn't have to follow anybody else's trends. He is the setter, right? And I think that if you're talking about that trend for old wealth and how the mentality of old wealth is to buy really well, in the inner circles, everybody knows what they just bought. But outwardly, they just appear like they're wearing good clothing. And if it starts to fall apart, they don't care what people
yeah,
think. It's like, oh, there's a hole in my elbow of my, or there's a pull in my, once again, cashmere sweater. There's a little
yeah.
patch. Or even they just wear it with a hole and wear, a shirt that shows through that
Mm.
hole. It's kind of a little bit of a pride, too.
And that's so weird. Whilst they think that way, but everyone else is just busy accumulating stuff. So weird.
Because the people who are busy accumulating stuff don't have the legacy and history and privilege of being able to only purchase the best and wear it until it falls apart.
Yeah.
They they want to look the part, but the people that are the part don't have to look the part. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of it's a it's a strange dichotomy there, but some of the wealthiest, coolest people around the world half the time look very sloppy, you know, in their regular lives, daily, day in, day out lifestyle because they don't have to look all camera ready.
And then you have our current crop of super billionaires who all have terrible personal style. Shots fired. um,
No comment.
we could talk a little bit about clothes waste, because you did mention that
Yeah.
it's a better option to go to thrift stores, consignment stores, and so forth. And a lot
Yes.
of people do find it gives them a very definite feeling of self righteousness and so forth when they drop off a bag of donated clothes. Now, I know over here that
Mm.
if you drop off your donated clothes, they're basically put on a trailer down to Eastern Europe somewhere. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
there's not a circular business at all.
No. No. I think that is the last, well, I don't know how many years, 20, 30, 40 years. I think that is the worst greenwashing crime of the fashion industry, and everybody is guilty. all of the brands that said drop off your used clothing, we'll give you 20% for you to buy new stuff. Horrible, terrible. Stop feeling like your clothing is being gifted to somebody else to wear that has lesser resources than you. What you're doing is you're just contaminating the world and causing a huge waste problem, as you just said. I don't believe in it. I don't promote it. The only reason I say that, because go to the thrift stores, the consignment shops, is because if somebody can't afford our clothing that we make here at California Cloth Foundry, they say, well, we want natural, but we can't afford your stuff, or it doesn't fit, or because we don't have a huge size range yet. We're getting there, we're expanding. I always say go thrift or consignment and find natural materials in lighter colors and repair and overdye and make it your own. But I do not promote wasteful overuse and dropping off of your wardrobe seasonally. Absolutely not. It's a crime. It's horrible. It's not the right thing to do. And there is in Europe, I think you probably know more about this than I do, a producer responsibility policy now, which is coming to America. And I think I've worked with an NGO here that was part of the product stewardship council, part of the if you produce it, you're responsible for the toxicity and the waste stream of it. But in Europe, I think it's even more so that if you produce it, you're responsible for receiving that product back from the customer and managing its next life.
I
Do you know about
think there
this?
is something happening in France along these lines, but I'm
Okay.
not sure that it has actually been ratified yet. But
Okay. I thought it was the EU,
well,
but
France
yeah.
would be part of the EU and so forth. But I mean,
Mm,
that is a
mm.
pretty interesting move, and I'm sure the clothing industry is violently opposed to it.
Yes.
I mean, they're quite
Yes.
happy if the
And
garment lasts just past the till on the way out, and then don't want anything more to do
right.
with it.
Right. And so to add a little layer to that, when we collaborated with this NGO that contacted us because they were working with LA Sanitation, Los Angeles Department of Sanitation, which is a nonprofit. The city was collecting, because this is one of the biggest cut and sew manufacturing hubs in America. New York, East Coast and West Coast. We're the West Coast. The city of Los Angeles had 3 different waste stream pilot projects. One was collecting all the cutting room waste and all the apparel manufacturing waste, and working with nonprofits and for-profits that disassemble and reassemble into clothing that can be sold, right, at retail. That was one waste stream. The other waste stream was to be recycled through other materials processes, like there's Circ, there's Evernew, there's a couple different Amber Cycle, I think, and these are companies that are chemically reducing these textiles from clothing. They're cutting them up, shredding them, putting them through a process that chemically transforms the textiles into new fibers. The problem is that most of these are blends with elastane. Elastane can't go through these systems, gunks up the system. Polyester, nylon, and cellulosic and wool fibers all have to be separated within chemistry. So that's another issue. And we were part of the third solution. And the third solution is composting your cutting room waste and your clothing. So we will take back all of the apparel from any of our customers. We will do the same thing. We'll take it back and either overdye it. We're not doing that yet, but there are companies that are overdyeing clothing. They'll tag it from customers, charge them a fee, and once a month overdye with a color. Brilliant. So it renews the clothing. For us, what we would do is take it back, and we've collected, you can't see, but in our studio here, we have bags and bags of cutting room waste. We need a container of cutting room waste from our natural materials to then go to a mill, which shreds mechanically our cutting room waste and our garments that are seconds or returned by our customers. We shred all of that fiber, add 50% virgin new modal or cotton or wool, flax, whatever hemp, whatever fiber we're spinning it with, and make a new yarn. And that yarn is 50% recycled from our previous
Yeah.
season, which has beautiful colors on it. It has mordant on it already. It has a marled look. So that yarn is already yarn
Yeah.
dyed. So it creates a beautiful new fabric. And that's from all of either our customers' waste that we'll take it back or from our cutting room waste. And the last is that anything that doesn't go into that recycled program of recycling the natural fiber, or if it's recycled too much and it just is not strong enough, it can then go into the earth as compost. And what we did with the city of Los Angeles is we composted about 1/3, I think 700 pounds of cutting room waste, which are all the little bits
Yeah.
and pieces from the clothing that we cut and sew. 1/3 cutting room waste, 1/3 food waste from LA Compostable, which they would collect the compost, the food waste from Los Angeles residents, and 1/3 wood chips. And it was composted in 8 weeks, almost finished, but then they had to reheat it with some enzymes, which are just more food, and get it hot
Mm.
again. That compost created topsoil in 12 weeks that was then tested at soil test labs across America, 3 different labs. That's topsoil. One of the lab directors called us and said, okay, I got to talk to you guys. Somebody told me that this is made from textiles. So whoever did this study, we need to share this with you. Number one, this topsoil is retaining moisture, and that is a huge problem with our soil now. It's not retaining the moisture, it's turning into clay. That's the Dust
Mm.
Bowl issue from our, 30s, 40s. So it's retaining moisture really well. Oh, it must be from some of the fiber quality that is in this compost. Number one. Number two, it's perfectly pH balanced. It could be from the food, but it's perfectly pH balanced because we have pH balancing minerals, which are mordants. Number three, it's chock full of potassium, magnesium, and beneficial minerals that make nutritious topsoil. And I said, well, that's from our botanicals and our mordants, which are beneficial minerals and beneficial botanicals. And so this topsoil, they said, is priceless. It's like ready to grow food um, in any commercial food growing
Yeah.
process. So that's the third option for fabric waste and apparel waste. If you make the apparel right, and it unfortunately ends up on some piles somewhere out in the open environment, like we've seen in all of the coverage from the drones, which is horrific because the off gas from those toxic textiles must be horrific, right? And terrible for the
Mm.
ecosystem. Imagine if it was all natural. That would just compost and probably sprout some food from birds dropping
If it
seeds,
was natural,
right?
it wouldn't be such a big deal to leave it in the desert because it might just rewild
Exactly.
it.
Yes.
Mm.
So those are, I mean, there's options. It just all costs more, which is
Yeah.
okay because people will value what they're actually buying in the first place and they'll become attached to it. Like King Charles becomes attached to his clothing until it turns into a rag.
It's strange now because most of the clothes waste has to be shipped off to the global south because their wages are so low that they can actually sort it and actually try to do something with it. It has struck me often
Right.
that clothes do like to travel, both when they're
Yeah.
new and at their end of life. It seems almost infinitely possible for clothes to travel from like up here, the far north, all the way to Africa or whatever,
Mhm.
there must be such a waste of energy and transport there, in addition to all the other
Mm.
problems.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we say we have a petrochemical free supply chain, it's not the transportation. It is only in our materials and chemistry. And that is something that has to be addressed as well. And that is why the fiber shed exists. One reason, because the more local you are, and we would love just to supply clothing to our local 150-mile radius if we could survive that way, but we can't, right? And we can't even produce our clothing within that 150-mile radius. So, fiber shed, local, local, local. The more local you produce and buy, the more energy economics are present. But I think that's just another aspect of this industry that it's being addressed, um, but it's not something that we can do because we're too small to, direct that our trucking is all electric trucks, or that the mills that we work with are solar powered or wind powered, or offset. So the energy costs that we can address um, are the carbon that is sequestered from the growing of our raw
Yeah.
materials, the carbon that is sequestered from the composting of our waste, right? The carbon that is saved from the recycling of our waste, the carbon that is saved from um, you from the dyeing process. So you need hot water and you need chemicals, but our chemicals are clean. So that wastewater does not need to be processed. So there's energy saved from non-processing our wastewater. Our wastewater can go right back into growing food. So there are ways that we're carbon sequestering to offset the transportation of our supply chain. And the larger the scale, the more you can tweak it and sequester more carbon and direct that wastewater from our mills and dye houses and finishing houses into useful channels instead of just going into the same water processing system that requires a lot of energy, because our wastewater should not be going in with the petrochemical wastewater.
No.
So I think that those are the quick fixes, or the early solutions, and there'll be more with transportation solutions. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I see we've been talking for quite a while now. Is there anything
Yeah.
we should have mentioned that we might not have mentioned?
Um, well, no, I mean, it's this podcast is a
Yeah.
conversation, right? I'm just grateful to be on your podcast, and our first conversation was around the indigo or woad um, shirt behind you and the green vest, which then I
You must
mentioned the farm to
you
table
must
cloths.
retell the initial story of the forest green.
Okay. The forest green. So to my eye, you had said to me, because I asked about the outfit on your dress form, and you had said that bright green, you didn't know how they achieved that natural dye. And I said, to me, it looked more like a Loden or forest green. And I said the way that we achieved quite a bright grass green was with weld over dyed with indigo. And
Weld being a yellow.
yes, it's called weldweed, and it grows naturally in forests and waterways, and it is a yellow. It's a beautiful bright yellow, and we naturally overdyed that with indigo. And the story is that Alice Waters, that is she is a amazing chef, and I think she coined the phrase anyway in America, farm to table food with her famous restaurant, Chez Panisse. She was doing a fundraising gala dinner event for her nonprofit called the Edible Schoolyard, which is schoolyards converted into farms to teach public school students how to grow their own food. And this gala meal, this fundraiser, was at the Global Climate Action Summit, and that was Bloomberg and our ex-mayor Gary Brown. I'll come up with the third celebrity. But anyway, this was the Global Climate Action Summit here or up in San Francisco in 2018, and we were commissioned by Alice Waters to make 90 farm to tablecloths for her gala dinner at this event. And she gave us a Pantone chip color, which was this grass green. I was going to grab my water bottle that's kind of a green color. She gave us a Pantone chip to match, and we matched it quite closely to this bright grass green. And the way that we did that was to dye 1,000 yards of canvas grown in Texas, milled on the East Coast in the Carolinas, and then shipped to us as raw canvas. Then we scoured it and we dyed it. We scoured it and mordanted it and dyed it with weld weed. But this was from extract that was 100% GOTS certified natural dyes. And that was so I'm giving the whole GOTS certified thing. That was a chemistry certification. And the organic cotton was USDA, Texas Organic Cotton. And so we had to match this Pantone color chip. So we dyed it all yellow. And then we worked with another vendor here to over dye that yellow with natural indigo that was grown in California. And that natural indigo is so alive that it created all of these different colors of green that were all about the same tone because it's all the same ingredients. But it was beautiful because these 90 tablecloths, which are like 10 yards almost of fabric each, because of banquet-sized tablecloths after cutting, sewing, and finishing. These 90 tablecloths all had a different color vibration to them, but they were all this grass green. And so when the photographs came back, Alice Waters was in her grass green dress, standing in between the Mayor Brown and Michael Bloomberg in front of the tablecloth, and the tablecloth matched her green dress perfectly. Okay. So it was it was such a wonderful experience to create the farm to tablecloths for her. And the conversation around the table as well, because all of these tables next to each other, all the colors were slightly different shades of the same color, so they were alive, and they could it validated the naturalness of the dye, and it also created a conversation around these farm to tablecloths for Alice Waters.
Yeah. Sounds great. I think it must have been a heck of a job to dye all that fabric.
Oh my God, it was a really big deal. It was a really hard project, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh, fire retardants. I'm just going to go full circle. These had to be fire retardant certified because this was a gathering of, as a public gathering with a large number of people. So fire wardens have to be assigned to these types of gatherings for safety for this conference. And so you need a certification that it has been coated with fire retardant. And we found a fire retardant chemist who actually coats with salts. And we also worked with Botanical Colors. She recommends, she also supplied us with our weld. So Botanical Colors is I'm just going to pitch her. She's the founder and president of a natural dye company. And they supply amazing botanical dyes that can be brought through the commercial conventional dye houses. So that's what we used. And I spoke with her. She gave us kind of the rundown of the salts and the minerals that would be needed to coat this fabric to render it fire retardant certified. And we found a fire retardant pad dye company in California that works with the film industry to make fire retardant like curtains for big theaters and textiles for films, for like when, you know, stunt work, they have to light something on fire, but then they have fabric nearby, so it has to be fireproof. So we actually did coat this all with fire retardant that is from salts, and it had no toxic PFAS, PFOS, fluoride, petrochemicals in it. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is that it gave these salts, you know, we gave the fire warden all of the swatches with the burn rate on it, because it does burn, but it self extinguishes. So we gave them all of these. They were all different colors of this green, and it gave it this kind of sheen because it had a layer of mineral on it that didn't completely soak, that protected the fabric, but it also, that layer of salt, if it's left out in the sun for too long, is going to bleach the indigo and some of the weld, so it would leave it a light green. And so we said, you cannot, because of this fire retardant, it's acting like a magnifying glass for color. You know how a magnifying glass, if you take the sun and magnify some fabric, you can actually either burn the fabric or bleach the fabric. So we said that when we sent them the tablecloths, please keep it wrapped in paper, because we wrapped all of these in huge, you know, craft paper. And then when you, after use, please wash it so that you get the fire retardant off of it, because it only had to be used for the gala event. And then you can use it regularly and it won't bleach out the color. But if you don't wash it, it's going to bleach out the color if left in the sun. So that's another reason, sadly, full circle, why the toxicity of performance is disregarded when they use chemistry that creates a solution to a challenge, which is fire retardant, but also creates a bigger problem, which is toxicity and illness.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off.
Whereas with some innovative, good thinking, it could be solved in a completely harmless way.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Okay, Lydia. It was absolutely...
I know, I geeked out. I went up and down about chemistry and stories and everything, but it was
absolutely fine. I love nerding out. Nerds are the best. Yep. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I did realise while you were talking about the garment industry in LA that I am wearing a pair of trousers made in LA because...
Fantastic. What's the brand? I don't know them.
Matsuda has been a guest on the pod. He's an excellent Japanese gent who lives in LA and makes clothes monetarily. So yeah, I am vaguely, slightly familiar with the LA garment industry.
Yay!
There you go.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that's great. I'm going to look them up, and I'm also going to send you something to wear with those LA jeans. Because we're doing a few men's pieces, so you'll get a because I can see you're wearing like a raglan sweatshirt there. I'll send you our
Japanese t-shirt,
short t-shirt.
but
it's awesome. That's great.
The raglan shoulders mean that even though I'm fairly stocky, it doesn't look like I'm wearing a t-shirt that's really huge. So
yeah, no, I love it. I'll send you a raglan crew.
Okay, Lydia. Bye-bye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you.
So